Hi, glad to see you on my channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It's important to me. Have a good view. Christmas 1944 and the New Year 1945 did not bode well for the soldiers of the Wehrmacht. The holidays came to them in different ways. Some died in Budapest surrounded by the Russians, others under the counterattacks of the British and Americans in the Ardennes. In those parts of the front where there was a lull, prayed that it would continue until the end of the war, but some still believed that the miracle weapon of the Führer will turn the tide of the war. The submarines continued to leave for their last voyages. The Luftwaffe aces and their green wingmen were still taking to the air, but their efforts were increasingly wasted. The civilian population of Germany was terrified, waiting for the next aerial bombardment and the arrival of foreign soldiers in their homes. But far to the north, far away from war-torn Europe, there was a small group of Wehrmacht soldiers who could have little fear for their lives and celebrate in complete safety, nourishment, and comfort. The only thing they had in common with their compatriots was the grim uncertainty of the future. Svalbard awaits an old acquaintance expedition. Haudegen was the last special operation of the Kriegsmarine to equip a secret meteorological station on the Svalbard archipelago. Such operations had been carried out since 1941, and for several years of the war, the Germans had accumulated vast experience in the deployment and staffing of secret meteorological reconnaissance bases in the most remote areas of the Arctic. In the summer of 1944, several such operations were planned at once. Edelweiss in Greenland, Goldschmied on Franz Josef Land, and Haudegen in the north of Spitsbergen. Group Edelweiss in late August failed to reach the coast and was captured by the U.S. patrol ship USCGS Nordland. To replace it was immediately sent Expedition Goldschmied, renamed Edelweiss II. However, this Expedition II was captured by the Americans almost immediately after landing. Only the last group of Haudegen had the good fortune to safely reach their destination and begin work. Traditionally, the expedition was given a name consonant with the surname of its leader, who was Wilhelm Deege. Before the war, he was a geography teacher at a school in Munster who combined teaching with scientific work, specializing in research on the geomorphology of Scandinavia and the Arctic islands. Deege was fluent in Norwegian and was drafted as an interpreter to the headquarters of the division assigned to capture Trondheim. After the success of Operation Weserübung, he was retained by the occupation forces in a non-burdensome position as a junior artillery officer, where the keen geographer was able to combine his duties with the study of Norway's topography. In October 1943, Deege was transferred to the Kriegsmarine, to the main naval observatory in Greifswald. This institution made a very strong impression on Deege. He characterized it as a huge factory of scientific warfare. However, the new employee did not have to deal with boring calculations of climatic tables for a long time. The chiefs of the secret expeditions that had already taken place drew the attention of the command that, in addition to his other strengths before the war, Deege had been to 3 long expeditions to Spitsbergen and knows this archipelago very well. After a brief interview with the head of the hydrographic department of the OCM Rear Admiral Fritz Conrad, Deege was included in the training program for the head of the new group for Spitsbergen. First, to Dege's amazement, he was sent in January 1944 to take a 3-month basic course for a Kriegsmarine officer, was promoted to the rank of Lieutenant of Naval Artillery and Sonderführer, and only then began special training at the base Golden Mountain in the Sudetes. In parallel with the training, the material base of the expedition was being formed. Scientific equipment, weapons, clothing, and equipment were ordered. It turned out to be a very difficult process, given that the group of 11 people was to spend at least a year in complete isolation from civilization, and at the same time, uninterruptedly carry out a whole range of measurements and regular transmission of indicators by radio. The main thing, more supplies. Unlike the heroes of famous adventure novels, the future Robinsonians of the Wehrmacht did not need to worry about shortages of anything. Deege made sure that the priority of these operations opens the door to any authority, and for the intendant responsible for supplying the groups, there is almost nothing impossible. According to the supply officer, the expedition could count on all the necessary equipment and gear available in the Reich and neutral countries, and any Reich enterprise was obliged to fulfill even the smallest individual order. The easiest of all was the feeding of the personnel. This issue had already been thoroughly worked out, including the staffing and packaging of rations. The command did not conceal that the situation at the front was such that it was impossible to guarantee timely evacuation of the group, so it was ordered to take food with a reserve of 520 days. The feeding scheme was original. Each member of the expedition for a month received a set of 5 numbered boxes, which contained individual rations of canned food at the rate of 1.4 kilo, namely 6,000 kilocalories per day, toiletries, vitamins, tobacco products. The last box contained a very generous ration of good alcohol: 3 liters of French red wine, 1.5 liters of brandy, a liter of German Steinhager gin, and a bottle of liquor. Everything that was not packed in tin cans was carefully sealed in cellophane by the supply service. In addition, there were also foodstuffs for the common cauldron: flour, dried potatoes, canned bread, sauerkraut, ham and sausages, 300 kilograms of pemmican, 234 kilograms of milk chocolate, and many other items. The group was armed, as they call it, to the teeth. In principle, 4 to 5 men were enough to fulfill the task, but frequent combat encounters with the enemy in Greenland and Spitsbergen led to the decision to increase the number of the expedition to 10 to 12 men, so that it could be divided into 2 groups with a hand machine gun each. The total number of weapons consisted of 2 MG-42 machine guns, 4 G-43 semi-automatic rifles, 8 Mauser 98K rifles, 4 MR-40 submachine guns, 11 Polish Vyas-35, Radom pistols, 4 Walter PPK pistols, 1 Walter TPH, 1 Luger PO8, 3 revolvers including a Russian Nagant, and 2 signal pistols. Hunting weapons included the M30 Drilling, a special 3-barrel shotgun designed for the Luftwaffe's emergency crew kit, an 8mm Mauser rifle, a Sauer double barrel, a small caliber 5.6mm rifle, and a large amount of ammunition, including expansive bullets. On the boxes with them, the Germans had thoughtfully written, "For bears only," so that the Americans and British would not have unpleasant questions in case of anything. There were 19,500 rounds of ammunition for machine guns and rifles, and 12,480 rounds for pistols and submachine guns. This arsenal was accompanied by 200 kilograms of explosives, detonators, 300 hand grenades, 258 rifle high explosive and 90 rifle anti-tank grenades, and 90 smoke bombs. The total weight of supplies and equipment, the list of which amounted to several thousand items, reached 80 tons. This included 10 tons of liquid fuel, 7 tons of coal for heating for 4 months, and then it was envisaged to switch to the Finns thrown out by the sea. In contrast to the Luftwaffe Arctic ground stations with personnel of 2-4 people, transmitting only the necessary minimum indicators, the Kriegsmarine stations were designed for the widest range of measurements, including aerological studies of the high atmosphere. The nomenclature of scientific equipment, radio communications, and spare parts provided for a 2-year operation. To produce hydrogen, which was required for launching radio sondes, Houtigen carried 2.2 tons of aluminum pellets and 3.5 tons of caustic soda. The gas was produced by reaction of these components in aqueous medium. The most inaccessible and little explored area, the northernmost island of the Nordostlandet archipelago, was chosen as the place for landing and equipping the station. More settled areas of Spitsbergen have long been the scene of small but fierce fights between Norwegian commandos and German saboteurs, so the risk of detecting the station and entering the battle was decided to minimize. The former diesel fishing trawler, now the Carl J. Bush, a 300 gross ton weather scout ship, was assigned to deliver the expedition. The trawler's crew consisted of seasoned veterans of long-range meteorological expeditions who had a bad reputation for being boorish and lovers of profiteering at other people's expense while being very superstitious. Dage was warned to keep an eye on the sailors, as the previous expedition, which the Carl J. Bush had taken to Spitsbergen, had lost a considerable amount of alcohol and tobacco. With such admonitions and wishes of good luck from the commander of the Kriegsmarine in Norway, Admiral Otto Chiliax, the Haudegen expedition set sail for its goal on September 10, 1944. Among polar bears and the ghosts of pioneers. The trawler was given the submarine U-307 as escort, which also carried supplies, equipment, and members of the expedition. In principle, Carl J. Bush could accommodate the entire expedition and its supplies, but the command ordered that the crew of the trawler also had a supply of food and fuel for 8 months in case of unforeseen wintering in the ice or the need to sink the ship and join the meteorologists. The Germans were lucky. They were not detected by aircraft and escorts of Allied convoys during the crossing, and the waters around Nordostlandet were free of ice, although navigation in them remained very dangerous. The area was poorly surveyed. Many reefs, shoals, and depths were not marked on the Norwegian pre-war chart, and what was indicated was often accompanied by the notation, presumably. Unloading at Reep Fjord, the chosen base, began on September 15th, and also did not go easily. Special sledges obtained from the mountain huntsmen and pneumatic trucks with 20-meter clearance on the mountainous terrain covered with large boulders proved to be of little help. The aluminum was packed in such a way that the submariners told Dega, whoever invented this should carry it. The expedition leader had to agree. Almost immediately began to accidentally break boxes of alcohol, but the Sonderführer did not make a scandal. Dege promised the sailors that at the end of the working day, he would give them 2 crates, as long as they did not drink during unloading and did not delay it. The former teacher knew how to deal with naughty schoolchildren, so he managed to establish excellent relations with the submarine commander, Oberleutnant zur See Friedrich Georg Herle, and with the rowdy crew of the Carl J. Bush, and the scientist was amazed that the predictions of the superstitious boorish people covered with amulets really came true. Taking advantage of the favorable ice conditions, Deege went around the island by submarine, found that it is completely uninhabited, laid emergency supply depots, reserve base, and destroyed all the old hunting huts that could serve the enemy. Destroying huts was considered sacrilege and unprecedented meanness in the Arctic. But, as Deege later admitted, what he feared most was that there would be Norwegian hunters he knew personally who had hosted him during his pre-war expeditions. In case they resisted or tried to escape, they would have to be destroyed. In this matter, the Sonderführer in Dege's soul unequivocally prevailed over the peaceful scientist. In 10 days, the expedition personnel, with the help of trawler sailors and submariners, not only unloaded all the property, but also fully equipped the living quarters, warehouses, and radio station. The farewell party was held on September 25th, and the parties tried to barter for each other's scarce household items as much as possible. The mechanic of the Carl J. Bush arranged a hot, fresh water shower for the polar explorers on board the trawler. In spite of the fact that during these 10 days of rest after hard work, the submariners and sailors of the trawler were having fun on the shore, hunting bears and eating various game, and all the dangers of war at sea were ahead of them. Nobody envied the remaining polar explorers. Too gloomy a landscape, heavy weather, and a sense of abandonment reigned all around. When Deege informed his comrades that it was in these very places that a German expedition of 1912, led by Navy Lieutenant Herbert Schroeder-Strantz, had gone missing, this fact only added to the brooding. The merciless Arctic did not forgive mistakes and self-confidence to anyone. A holiday at the 80th degree of northern latitude, Deege was an experienced polar explorer and teacher, so he knew perfectly well how badly the Arctic influences the human psyche, especially in the conditions of the polar night. In addition to the strict fulfillment of duties and routine at the station, the personnel always had something to do if the weather was not too severe. Firewood collection, shooting polar bears that continuously stormed the camp in search of food, hunting reindeer and eiders, setting traps for Arctic foxes, meat preparation and hide dressing, territory survey. There was enough work for everyone. In his free time, the station commander gave lectures to his subordinates, taught them methods of scientific research, and organized various thematic evenings. Birthdays were celebrated with pomp, but according to Deege, they tried to celebrate any holiday and even Reich Animal Protection Day, As long as there was a reason to get together and with a glass of vitamin cocktail to sing songs, listen to music, there was a gramophone and 150 records, or to amuse themselves. The coming of December was greeted with excitement, as the Houdigan chief later recalled. The preparations for the holiday were, as usual, even more joyful than the celebration itself. For starters, Dege decided to celebrate the popular St. Nicholas Day in Germany, which is celebrated on December 6th. Traditionally, on this day, St. Nicholas and his servant Knecht Ruprecht visit children, give gifts to those who have behaved well, and punish the naughty. For the role of St. Nicholas, Dege chose 40-year-old Sergeant Gustav Scheidweiler, who was the only one besides the chief experienced polar explorer, and moreover older than him in age. Scheidweiler enthusiastically agreed, suggesting to celebrate in the most rigid Westphalian custom, when the guilty are actually beaten with a birch on the soft place. Dege gave the go-ahead, instructing Scheidweiler to pick up Ruprecht, prepare costumes, gifts, a set of imported cigarettes and cologne, and took upon himself the preparation of the traditional ritual treat, Stutenkerl, a pastry in the shape of a man with raisins instead of eyes and a smoking pipe in his mouth. Everything went as the head of the expedition wanted, very cheerful and with traditional German coloring. The young people of the station at first unkindly perceived the festivities as a manifestation of hazing, but when it turned out that by analogy with the Day of Neptune, everyone would get their own, including the bosses, the mood immediately lifted. Having let the cognac go around the circle, the next polar explorer was read out his transgressions, and then there was an execution. The rod was lath number 19, a meter-long wooden lath, 1 inch thick from a set of collapsible houses. Everyone received gifts and punishments. The Sonderführer himself received 7 times on the ass for constantly not letting everyone sleep in the daytime. Having thus warmed up, the Germans approached the long-awaited Christmas with even greater vigor. The weather was favorable, strong wind and frost minus 25-30 degrees, allowed to spend the holidays in cabins and built sauna, distracted only by taking measurements and transferring them to trams. All preparations were again taken over by Dege and Scheidweiler, as the only married old men who knew how to celebrate properly and acted as stay-at-home Reich moms to their young subordinates. One of the station's sailors was even a school student of Dege's. Old men again baked traditional pastries, and festive napkins were made from white cloth and telephone wire. On the first day of Christmas, December 25th, morning coffee was allowed in the beds, followed by the much-anticipated holiday banquet. The Christmas menu at the Houdigan station was probably as good, if not better, than at the Führer's residence. Mushroom soup, roast venison with potatoes and asparagus with Madeira sauce, pudding with preserved apricots, pies, mocha coffee, champagne, and brandy. Cigars were smoked underneath it all, and gradually everyone switched to Northern Lights cocktails, mixing cognac and champagne. In such a measured pace, to the accordion, and past all Christmas holidays. The chief of the station ordered the cook not to spare the best delicacies from the station's stocks. The excesses were not in vain. Immediately after the holidays, one of the polar explorers had to have a tooth extracted, and another had an intestine ache so bad that an attack of appendicitis was suspected. Nevertheless, when in March 1945, Berlin requested Dege's readiness to winter until the fall of 1946, the personnel of the station enthusiastically agreed. A lot of food was saved. A minimum replenishment of supplies was required. First of all, a minimum of 200 liters of beer was requested. Cognac and wine were no longer in the throat. But in April came the order to stop preparations for wintering, and soon the news of surrender. On May 9, 1945, they heard a Soviet weather station from Odessa, which was the first to broadcast an unencrypted international bulletin. The Houdigan station also began transmitting its readings in plain text to the International Meteorological Network. Only 3 German-made aluminum plates. That's all that the Arctic, which knows how to keep its secrets, has given. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Forget to put a like and subscribe to the channel. It's important to me. See you soon.